What if the person you invited just to fill a seat at a wedding became the one you couldn't imagine your life without? It started with an invitation he almost didn't send. Ethan Hale sat in his car, parked outside his apartment, staring at the embossed wedding card in his hands. His best friend from college, Ryan, was getting married in 2 weeks, a destination wedding by the coast. All white tents and champagne sunsets. The invitation said +1 optional. Optional, it should have been simple, but it wasn't, because Ethan didn't have anyone to bring. Not really. He'd been through a breakup a few months earlier, one that had left him hollow in ways even he didn't understand. The idea of showing up alone, surrounded by couples laughing in candlelight, made his chest tighten, so he scrolled through his contacts aimlessly, until a name stopped him. Leila Grant. He barely knew her, a friend of a friend, someone he'd met once at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. She was witty, sharp-eyed, and had this unshakable calm about her, like she saw the world at a different speed than everyone else. They'd exchanged maybe 20 words at night, but she'd lingered in his mind. He typed the message 3 times before hitting send. Hey, random question. Would you be my +1 for a wedding next weekend? Totally casual, no pressure. Just figured you might enjoy it. He expected her to decline. Instead, 5 minutes later she replied, that sounds like trouble. I'm in. And just like that, the smallest decision of his life began unraveling everything he thought he knew about love, timing, and fate. The day of the trip, the sky was the color of cold steel. They met at the airport gate, him awkwardly clutching his carry-on, her breezing in wearing a soft cream sweater and carrying coffee for both of them. For courage, she said with a smirk. Ethan smiled, feeling the first real warmth in weeks. The flight was quiet at first, small talk, laughter that came to eyes early. But somewhere above the clouds, conversation slipped into something deeper. She asked him why he hesitated when he laughed, why he looked out the window so much. He told her about the breakup, about the way people leave without slamming doors, how silence can hurt more than words. Leila didn't try to fix it, she just listened. When the plane landed, something unspoken had already shifted between them. The wedding venue was like something from a dream. Sprawling gardens, ocean breeze, a golden sunset dipping into the horizon, guests in pastel clothes, string lights fluttering in the wind. Ethan introduced Leila as his friend, and though she smiled politely, he could see a flicker of mischief in her eyes. She fit into the scene effortlessly, laughing with strangers, swaying to soft music, stealing glances at him like they shared a secret no one else knew. That night, during the rehearsal dinner, Ethan caught himself watching her more than he should. The way she threw her head back when she laughed, how she ran her fingers along the rim of a glass when lost in thought. He wasn't supposed to feel this, not for someone he'd just invited on a whim. But something about her presence made the noise in his mind go quiet. Later, as the crowd thinned and the night deepened, they slipped away from the party, down to the beach, barefoot in the sand, the ocean roaring in the dark. I think weddings are strange, she said, her voice barely rising above the waves. Everyone talks about forever like it's a promise you can make in advance. He glanced at her. You don't believe in forever, I believe in moments, she said, and how some of them feel like they could last forever. There was something in the way she said it, like she wasn't afraid of truth. He wanted to kiss her right then, but he didn't, not yet. The next day, the wedding unfolded like a scene out of a movie. The bride walked down the aisle under a cascade of white petals. Violins played softly, and the air smelled of salt and flowers. Ethan felt an ache he couldn't explain, the kind that comes when you realize how fragile joy is. During the reception, he and Leila danced, not well, not gracefully, but freely. And in that blur of music and laughter, something broke open between them. He leaned close enough to whisper, "You were supposed to be my +1, not the reason I forget everyone else exists." Her eyes lifted to meet his steady, curious, unafraid. "Then maybe," she said, "you invited the right person." The kiss happened quietly, under the flicker of fairy lights. It wasn't dramatic, not cinematic, but it was real. The kind of kiss that feels like recognition rather than discovery. That night, lying awake in the dim hotel room, Ethan couldn't sleep. The sound of the waves, the faint laughter still drifting from the distant party, everything felt too fragile, too perfect. He kept thinking, this wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be a guest, a placeholder, a name on a seat card. Instead, she'd become the gravity pulling his world into focus. But perfection has a habit of cracking when you stare at it too long. The morning after the wedding, Leila was quiet, distant. She watched the sea from the balcony, the wind tangling her hair. Ethan felt the unease settle in his chest like a stone. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "I'm not sure I should have come." He froze. "What do you mean?" She turned toward him, eyes filled with something he couldn't read. "You're still in love with someone else, Ethan. You talk about her like she's gone, but part of you is still waiting." He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't because deep down she wasn't. Leila smiled faintly. "You don't have to explain. I didn't come here for promises." He didn't know what to say. The silence stretched between them, heavy and unfinished. They left the hotel together, but in silence. The car ride to the airport was filled with unspoken words, his hands gripping the steering wheel, her gaze fixed on the horizon. It felt like something ending before it had begun. At the gate, she turned to him. "You'll find her again. Or maybe you'll find yourself first." Then she was gone, walking toward the terminal, swallowed by the crowd. For weeks after, Ethan replayed that weekend in his mind. Every detail, every word. He tried to tell himself it had been just a moment, a brief escape, but something about her lingered. The way she saw him, the way she spoke truths no one else dared to. Months passed, seasons changed, and still, every time he saw an ocean or heard a wedding song, he thought of her. Until one night, when his phone buzzed with a message, it was from Leela. "Hey," it read, "guess who just got invited to another wedding?" Beneath it, a single question. Need a +1. He stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding in that familiar rhythm. The kind that feels like both an ending and a beginning. He typed back slowly, carefully, afraid of breaking whatever invisible thread still connected them. "Only if you promise not to disappear this time." Her reply came almost instantly. "No promises, just moments. I'll see you there." The next scene begins on another coastline, different city, different sunset. He stands waiting by the water, holding a single flower, wondering if she'll show, wondering if what they had was real or just the echo of something unfinished. Then he hears it, the soft click of heels on stone. He turns and there she is, smiling like she's been gone for a lifetime and just found her way back. She walks toward him slowly, eyes never leaving his. "I thought you didn't believe in forever," he says softly. She stops in front of him, close enough for the wind to carry her words. "I don't," she says, "but I believe in this moment. And right now, you're the only one I want." For the first time, Ethan doesn't think about what comes next. Because sometimes, the story isn't about finding forever. It's about finding the one moment and the one person that makes time stop long enough to feel infinite. But as the camera drifts back, the waves crash harder against the shore. And in her eyes, just for a second, there's something else, a flicker of hesitation, a secret not yet told. And that's where everything changes. The sea wind curled around them, cool and restless, carrying the scent of salt and something older like memory itself. Leela stood so close Ethan could see the reflection of the waves in her eyes. But that flicker, that brief shadow that crossed her face, unsettled him. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the easy smile he remembered from that first trip. Yet now, he couldn't unsee it. The wedding was 2 days away, but the coastal town already felt like a stage being set. Lanterns hung from balconies, musicians tested their strings by the waterfront, and the hum of distant laughter wove through the night. Ethan and Lila walked side by side through cobblestone streets, their footsteps sinking without thought. It should have felt like a beginning, but something about her silence kept tugging at him, like a note slightly off key. At dinner she seemed distracted, tracing circles on her glass, staring past him. When he asked if she was all right, she smiled that careful, deflective smile people use when the truth feels too heavy to speak. "Just thinking," she said, "about how the same people who make us happiest also have the power to undo us completely." He studied her, trying to read the emotion hidden beneath the calm. "Are you talking about me or someone else?" She met his eyes. "Does it matter?" The waiter arrived then, breaking the tension with the sound of plates clinking against the table. The conversation drifted elsewhere, lighter, safer, but the question lingered between them like a silent third guest. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The sound of the tide outside his window seemed louder than before, almost accusing. He thought about the moment she appeared earlier that day, the way she smiled like she'd crossed an ocean to get there. But now he wondered, what had she left behind to come? The next morning the world was gold and blue. The wedding party gathered on the terrace of a seaside villa, sunlight spilling across the marble floors. Lila wore a pale dress that caught the light every time she moved, like she carried a fragment of dawn with her. Ethan couldn't look away. They danced again, this time surrounded by laughter and camera flashes. But their rhythm felt different, closer, slower, more deliberate. He could feel her heartbeat through her hand, steady and strong. Yet her eyes darted away when he tried to hold her gaze too long. Between songs, she leaned in and whispered, "Walk with me later. There's something I need to tell you." He nodded, a quiet dread curling in his stomach. After sunset, they slipped away from the party, just like before, down a narrow path behind the villa that led to the cliffs overlooking the sea. The air smelled of rosemary and salt, and the last light of day bled out over the horizon. She stopped near the edge, her hair wild in the wind. "I wasn't sure I should come," she said softly. He felt it then, the same word she'd spoken months ago, echoing like a ghost. "You said that once before." "I know." She took a shaky breath. "And I still don't know if it was the right choice." Ethan stepped closer. "Leela, what's going on?" She looked at him, her expression raw and unguarded. "You think I disappeared because of you, because I was afraid of what we were becoming. But that's not the truth." "Then tell me the truth," he said. She hesitated, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "I got sick, Ethan, a few months after the first wedding. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell my family at first. I didn't want to be someone's burden or their heartbreak." The world seemed to tilt. He felt his breath catch in his chest, words dying before they reached his lips. "I didn't disappear because I didn't care," she continued. "I disappeared because I didn't know how to let someone care for me." He stared at her, the noise of the waves dissolving into silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you already looked like someone who'd been broken enough times," she said. "And I didn't want to be another thing that hurt you." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind pulling at the sea below. Then Ethan reached for her hand, gently, like something fragile that could vanish if held too tightly. "You don't get to decide who breaks me," he said quietly. "That's my choice." She laughed through her tears, a sound that was both joy and pain. "You always say the right thing at the wrong time." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's because I never know when I'll lose the chance." They stood there until the stars emerged, each one trembling in the dark water below. When she leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, he realized how fiercely he wanted to protect this moment, this fragile calm before the next wave. The following day, the wedding unfolded under a silver sky. The bride and groom exchanged vows on the cliffs, the sea roaring like an audience that refused to stay quiet. Ethan and Lila sat among the guests, their hands occasionally brushing, their eyes saying what words couldn't. But midway through the ceremony, he noticed her flinch, subtle, fleeting. Her fingers tightened around his, then went limp. "Lila," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "I'm fine," but she wasn't. After the reception, she disappeared again, not in the dramatic sense, but quietly, like she always did. He searched the terrace, the gardens, the shoreline, until he found her sitting alone by the pier, shoes off, feet in the water. "I thought you left," he said, breathless from running. "Almost did," she said without turning. "It's easier than explaining why I don't stay." He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "You don't have to explain anything. Just don't vanish again." "I can't promise that," she said softly, "but I can promise I'll try." They stayed there as the tide crept closer, until the water lapped at their ankles and the world went quiet. That night, something changed between them, not a confession, not a resolution, but an understanding. She let him in, just enough for him to see the fear beneath her strength. And for the first time, he didn't try to fix it, he just stayed. Over the next few weeks, their lives intertwined in quiet, deliberate ways. He'd visit her in the city, bringing books and flowers and an awkward kind of hope. She'd leave little sketches in his carring drawings of oceans and open doors. There were good days where she seemed untouched by the shadows she carried, and there were others where she'd grow quiet, distant, like she was somewhere far beyond his reach. One evening, she invited him to her apartment for dinner. Candles flickered on the table. Soft music drifted from an old record player. It felt almost normal, almost safe. "I've been painting again," she said, showing him a half-finished canvas. It was abstract, colors bleeding into one another like light dissolving in water. "It's beautiful," he said. She smiled faintly. "It's chaos. But sometimes chaos is all that's honest." He didn't argue. He just watched her move through the room, realizing how much of his life had started to orbit around her quiet gravity. Later that night, as he was leaving, she stopped him at the door. "Ethan," she said softly, "if I ever disappear again, promise me you won't come looking." He frowned. "Why would you say that?" "Because some goodbyes aren't meant to be fought," she whispered. "They're meant to be remembered." He didn't answer. He just kissed hers, low, deliberate, desperate, as if that could anchor her to him. But a few weeks later, she was gone. No warning this time. No message. Her phone disconnected. Her apartment empty. Her art supplies scattered like remnants of a storm. Ethan spent days searching, calling mutual friends, retracing every place they'd ever been. Nothing. It was as if she'd been swallowed by the wind. Until one morning a letter arrived. No return address, just his name written in her handwriting. He opened it slowly, heart pounding. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay. Not because I didn't want to, but because the time I have left is not enough for both of us to keep pretending we have forever. I don't want you to watch me fade. I want you to remember me as the woman who danced barefoot by the sea and laughed too loudly at your terrible jokes. You once told me you didn't believe in endings, only pauses. Maybe this is ours. Maybe in another life, we get to finish the story. Lila." The paper trembled in his hands. He didn't cry, not immediately. Instead, he walked out of his apartment, through the city streets, until he reached the water. The same sea that had framed every moment of their story. The horizon blurred into mist, and for a moment, he imagined her there again, barefoot, smiling, untouchable. That night, as the tide pulled against the shore, he whispered to the wind, "You were never my +1, Lila. You were the reason I showed up at all." And somewhere in the distance, beneath the crash of waves and the quiet hum of the stars, it felt like she heard him. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye, an envelope wedged beneath the bench overlooking the sea. His name again, her handwriting again. Only this time, the letter inside didn't begin with a goodbye. It began with, "There's something I never told you." And just like that, the story wasn't over. The envelope trembled in his hands as the wind picked up, tugging at the edges like it wanted to take the truth before he could read it. Ethan sank onto the weathered bench overlooking the water, the same place they had stood together, the same horizon where she had smiled before vanishing. The moonlight caught the curve of her handwriting, familiar, elegant, a trace of her voice pressed into paper. He unfolded the letter slowly, afraid the words inside might undo him. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm already gone again, but not far. Not this time. There's something I've carried for years, something I thought I could bury beneath the noise of living, but you deserve to know what you were really part of. I didn't meet you by chance. I didn't come to that first wedding because of an invitation. I came because of a promise. He stopped reading. His pulse began to thrum in his ears. The waves hissed below, restless. He forced himself to keep going. You once told me you believe in moments that last forever. I do too, but mine began before you ever sent that message. Ryan, the friend whose wedding you took me to, he was the one I promised I'd watch over. I knew him before you did, years before. We were supposed to marry once, and when he broke it off, I thought I'd never recover. Until the night he told me he'd found someone else, someone kind, loyal, the sort of friend who could be trusted with everything. Your name came up more times than you can imagine. Ethan's chest tightened. The air seemed to thin around him. He didn't know how to tell you what really happened back then. I suppose I never did either. But when the invitation arrived, I realized I had to face it to see if I could stand in front of you and not feel the past burning through my skin. I thought it would be one night, one dance, and I'd disappear quietly. But then you looked at me the way no one ever had. And I broke every rule I'd set for myself. The paper slipped from his hands. It landed on the ground, half buried in sand. The sound of the ocean blurred into a single roar. Leela and Ryan. The thought felt impossible, almost absurd. Yet it explained everything, the strange flicker of sadness in her eyes at the wedding. The way she'd known where to go, who everyone was, without him ever mentioning details. It had never been coincidence. He picked the letter back up, his fingers trembling. By the time you read this, you'll probably hate me, and you should. But please understand, what I felt for you was real. Maybe it started as an attempt to close a chapter, but you became something else entirely. You became the story I never expected to find inside the ending. Her handwriting trailed off near the bottom, as if she'd hesitated or run out of courage. There's one more thing you need to know. I left something for you. It's not forgiveness, I'm asking for its truth. Look beneath the painting I gave you. The chaos has a shape if you look long enough. Ethan folded the letter carefully, his thoughts spiraling. The painting, her last gift, the abstract swirl of light and shadow she'd shown him that night. He'd hung it in his living room without thinking. Now it felt like it was staring back at him. He drove home that night, through rain that blurred the world into streaks of silver and gray. His reflection in the windshield looked like someone else, someone older, quieter, haunted. Every turn of the road replayed fragments of her voice. You don't believe in forever. Maybe this is ours. Don't come looking. When he finally reached his apartment, the silence inside felt too large. He turned on the light. The painting hung on the opposite wall, its colors twisting like storm clouds in motion. He lifted it down, flipped it over, and there, taped behind the frame, was a small USB drive and a folded photograph. The photo stopped him cold. It was of Leela and Ryan, younger, happier, standing on the same cliffs where the wedding had taken place, her head resting on his shoulder. He sat on the couch, the air pressing heavy around him, and plugged the drive into his laptop. A single video file appeared. He opened it. The screen flickered, then steadied. Lila sat in front of the camera, hair pulled back, eyes bare and unflinching. If you're watching this, Ethan, I guess I couldn't explain in person, she began. Her voice was softer than he remembered, stripped of the teasing cadence it once carried. You probably hate me right now, and that's okay. I think part of me always knew this would end like this, me leaving, you chasing a ghost I created. She looked away from the camera, then back. Ryan was the love I couldn't keep, but you were the love I didn't see coming. You reminded me what it felt like to be known. That night on the beach, when you asked if I believed in forever, I lied. I believed in it that night. For the first time since him. She paused, drawing a shaky breath. But there's something I didn't tell either of you. The illness isn't what's killing me, it's what came after. I joined a clinical trial that went wrong. I signed the paperwork without reading it properly. And now they're trying to make it disappear. I couldn't risk pulling you into that. Ethan's breath hitched. What are you talking about? He whispered to the empty room. I left the documents in a locker at the train station, she continued. You'll understand when you see them. If I don't make it, maybe you can finish what I started. Maybe you can make it mean something. The screen flickered again, her image dissolving into static, her final words half swallowed by the recording. I didn't come to your life by accident, Ethan. I came to make things right. Then the video cut to black. He sat there for a long time, the hum of the laptop the only sound in the room. Outside, rain hammered against the windows. Every part of him wanted to reject it, to pretend it was a trick of grief, a story she'd built to soften the truth. But the details were too precise, the fear in her voice too real. By morning, he was on a train to the city she had mentioned. The locker was easy to find, an old metal compartment in a nearly empty station, the kind of place that held more echoes than travelers. Inside a plain envelope with his name, he opened it and found medical reports, legal papers, and a small notebook filled with her handwriting. Each page was dated, detailing her treatments, the experiment, the warnings she ignored, but in between the notes were fragments of something else, letters addressed to him, never sent. I keep thinking about that first flight, how the clouds looked like they were holding us up. You were so careful with every word, as if you didn't want to break the air between us. Sometimes I wonder if I met you too late, or exactly when I was supposed to. If I disappear, don't turn me into a tragedy. Turn me into a lesson." He closed the notebook, pressing it against his chest. It felt like holding her heartbeat in his hands, faint, fading but still alive. The next days blurred. He took the documents to a lawyer, tried to understand the scope of what she'd uncovered. There were non-disclosure clauses, signatures from private medical firms, lists of patients who'd gone missing after the same trial. Her name wasn't even listed among them. It was as if she'd been erased. And yet, here she was, in fragments of paper, in digital echoes, in the scent of paint still clinging to his fingers. That night, Ethan stood by his window, watching the city lights flicker like faraway stars. He thought about the version of her he knew, the woman who spoke of moments instead of forever, who believed that love could exist even when time couldn't hold it. And now he understood she had been fighting for more than survival. She had been fighting to leave a truth behind. He opened her notebook again, and near the final pages, one sentence was underlined twice. "If the sea remembers, maybe you will too." The next morning, he drove back to the coast where they had met, the same cliffs, the same bench. The sea was calmer now, a mirror of gray light stretching to the horizon. He stood where she had once stood, the wind cool against his face. For a moment, he imagined her voice in the wind. "Don't come looking," he smiled faintly. "Too late," he whispered. As he turned to leave, something glinted between the rocks below the bench, a small locket, half buried in the sand. He picked it up carefully, brushing away the salt and grit. Inside was a faded photo of him, asleep on the beach after that first night, and her beside him, looking straight at the camera. She'd been watching him even then. A wave surged against the shore, foam hissing around his feet, and in that moment, he realized something he hadn't before. Maybe she hadn't vanished to escape him. Maybe she'd left a trail, piece by piece, knowing he'd follow it when the time was right. He looked back toward the horizon, heart pounding with a new kind of clarity. The truth wasn't finished. The story wasn't either. Somewhere out there, in the silence between tides, she was still waiting to be found. And for the first time since she'd left, Ethan didn't feel like he was chasing a ghost. He felt like he was walking toward her. But as he turned to climb the path back to his car, a man was standing near the road toll, dressed in black, watching him too intently to be a passerby. Their eyes met, and Ethan froze, because the man was holding another envelope. Her handwriting, and suddenly, everything he thought he knew about Leela Grant began to unravel once more. The man didn't move. He stood by the road, framed against the fading light, his silhouette sharp against the horizon. The envelope in his hand caught the wind, fluttering like a signal Ethan couldn't decipher. For a moment, the sound of the sea swallowed everything, its endless rhythm, its pull, the way it seemed to echo his own heartbeat. "Who are you?" Ethan called out, his voice rough from the salt air. No answer. The man simply started walking toward him, slow, measured steps crunching against the gravel. Ethan's pulse quickened. Instinctively, he took a step back, his mind racing through every impossible explanation. Lila's letter, the video, the missing documents, and now this. When the man finally stopped a few feet away, Ethan could see him clearly. Early 40s, sharp-featured, dressed too neatly for the desolate coast. His eyes were calm, almost clinical. "You're Ethan Hale," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded slowly. "And you are?" The man extended the envelope. "Someone who's been trying to keep Leela Grant's name off a list it was never supposed to be on." Ethan's stomach turned. He reached for the envelope, but the man didn't let go immediately. "You shouldn't have come here," the man said. "She didn't want you involved." Ethan's voice hardened. "She involved me the moment she asked me to find her." The man studied him for a long moment, then released the envelope. "Then you should know the truth before it's too late." Ethan tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed a medical facility, a sterile hallway lined with doors. In the corner, a time stamp 4 weeks ago. In the center of the frame was Leela. She was walking down the corridor, flanked by 2 figures in lab coats. Her hair was shorter, her posture weaker, but her face was unmistakable. Ethan stared at the photo, unable to breathe. "This can't be real," he whispered. The man's voice was steady, detached. "It's very real. The facility is run by a private division of the pharmaceutical company she worked with. They moved her there after the trial failed. She's alive." The words came out broken, half hope, half disbelief. "For now," the man said, "but not for long if they finish what they started." Ethan looked up sharply. "Then take me to her." The man shook his head. "It's not that simple. You weren't supposed to find this. You've already drawn attention by digging into the files she left behind. If you go after her now, you'll be walking into something you don't understand." Ethan's voice cracked with quiet fury. "Then explain it." For the first time, the man hesitated. The wind tore across the cliffs, carrying the scent of rain and salt. "Leila wasn't a patient," he said finally. "She was a developer. She worked on the serum that caused the trial to collapse. She was trying to save people land when it started killing them. She turned whistleblower. The company silenced the others. She was the only one left who still had the data." Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him. "She said she joined a trial. She did, the man replied. Her own. She tested the serum on herself to prove it could still work, and nearly did. But the side effects were irreversible. That's why she left you, because she thought dying was the only way to protect you. The sky broke open above them, a sudden burst of rain slicing through the air. Ethan barely noticed. His mind was a storm of images: Lila laughing by the sea, her trembling hands, the way she'd said, "Don't come looking." "What do you want from me?" he asked. The man's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. To finish what she started. She wanted to expose them. "The documents you found there, only a fraction. The rest are with her. And if we don't reach her soon, they'll erase everything, including her." Lightning flashed over the horizon, a brief white scar across the sky. Ethan's hands clenched around the photo. "Where is she?" The man hesitated, then said quietly, "A facility north of the city. You'll know it when you see it. But once we go, there's no turning back." Ethan met his gaze. "Then let's go." They drove through the night in silence, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The road wound through forests and abandoned towns, places that felt forgotten by time. Every few miles Ethan glanced at the photograph again, as if it might change under his gaze. He couldn't stop replaying her words. "Maybe this is ours. Maybe in another life we get to finish the story." Now he knew what she'd meant. Hours later, the man who had introduced himself only as Cole pulled the car onto a narrow dirt road. In the distance, faint lights flickered through the mist, a compound, fenced and guarded, rising from the darkness like a wound in the landscape. "This is it," Cole said. "If she's alive, she's inside." Ethan stared at the complex, a knot of fear and determination tightening in his chest. "How do we get in?" Cole handed him an ID badge and a small keycard. "I still have access, but once we're inside, everything moves fast. Cameras, guards, containment protocols. You stay close, and you don't talk unless I tell you to." Ethan nodded. They moved through the rain toward the perimeter, the sound of thunder masking their footsteps. The security gate loomed ahead, metal slick with water. Cole swiped the card, and the gate slid open with a low hum. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and metal. The walls were pale, the lights too bright. Every sound echoed their footsteps, the faint buzz of electricity, the distant hiss of ventilation systems. Ethan's heart pounded. Every corridor looked the same, sterile and endless. "She's in the isolation wing," Cole whispered. "Third floor, room 314. As they moved deeper into the facility, something began to shift inside Ethan. The grief that had haunted him for months hardened into resolve. Whatever waited at the end of that hallway, truth lie, or ghosty, needed to face it. When they reached the door marked 314, Cole stopped. "Once you go in, I can't protect you," he said. "She might not even recognize you." Ethan didn't answer. He pushed the door open. The room was small. The lights dimmed. Machines hummed quietly in the background. And there, lying against crisp white sheets, was Lila. She looked fragile, paler, thinner but alive. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of the door. For a second, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she smiled. "You weren't supposed to find me," she whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. "You left me no choice." She tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "You shouldn't be here." The door opened again. Cole stepped in, holding a folder. His expression was unreadable. "It's done," he said. "We have the files, but we don't have much time." Lila's gaze flicked between them. "Cole, you brought him?" "He brought himself," Cole said quietly. "You wanted this finished. He deserves to know how it ends." She looked at Ethan, then really looked hand. Something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of relief and sorrow intertwined. "I didn't want you to see me like this." He took her hand gently. "I didn't come to see you. I came to take you home." Her fingers tightened around his. "Ethan, there is no home anymore. Once the data leaves this building, they'll destroy everything, every record, every trace, including me." He shook his head. "We'll run." Her smile was soft, almost tender. "You still think everything can be saved?" Cole glanced at the door. "We have 10 minutes before the lockdown. Decide." Lila reached under her pillow and pulled out a small flash drive. "Everything's on here, the data, the names, the proof. But if you take it, they'll come after you." Ethan looked at her, then at Cole. "Then we make sure they can't find us." The lights flickered suddenly. An alarm began to sound, a low mechanical wail that filled the corridors. Red lights strobed against the walls. "They know we're here," Cole said sharply. "We have to move." Ethan turned to Lila. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, her breath shallow. He slipped his arm around her, helping her to her feet. They moved into the hallway, the alarm echoing through every corridor. Figures in uniforms appeared at the far end, their radios crackling. Cole led the way, his badge unlocking door after door. "Keep moving," he ordered. The facility seemed to shift around them, lights dimming, metal doors sliding shut. Each second stretched like an eternity. As they reached the final exit, Lila stumbled, gripping Ethan's arm. "If we don't make it, promise me something," she gasped. "Don't," he said. "We're making it. Promise me," she insisted. "If I don't let this become about revenge. Let it mean something." He looked at her. "Heartbreaking. It already does." They pushed through the last door, rain and wind slamming into them like freedom itself. The night roared round them, sirens thunder, the hiss of the sea beyond the hill. Cole sprinted ahead toward the car. Come on. But as they ran, a sudden flash of light cut through the darkness, a spotlight from the ridge above. Voices shouted, "Down!" Cole yelled. Ethan pulled Leela close, shielding her as the beam swept across the field. She pressed the flash drive into his hand, her voice trembling. "If anything happens, don't stop. Promise me." Before he could answer, a gunshot cracked through the storm. The world seemed to freeze. Cole turned sharply, shouting something Ethan couldn't hear over the rain. The light swung wildly, and when Ethan looked down, Leela's blood was already blooming against his shirt like a spreading rose. Her lips parted, her eyes searching his. "It's okay," she whispered. "You found me." He caught her before she fell, the flash drive still clutched in his fist, the sound of the sea crashing somewhere beyond. And in that suspended moment, everything, the storm, the alarms, the shouting, seemed to stop. Only her voice remained faint and fading. "Finish it, Ethan." Then the light vanished, and the night swallowed everything. The rain didn't stop. It fell like a curtain between the living and the dead, washing the world in streaks of silver and shadow. Ethan knelt in the mud, holding Leela's body against his chest, her blood seeping through his fingers, hot against the cold night air. Every breath she took was shallower than the last, as though the storm itself was stealing her away. Cole's voice cut through the noise, urgent but distant. "Ethan, we have to go." He didn't move. Couldn't the rest of the world had gone dim, reduced to the faint sound of a heartbeat against his ribs? He brushed her hair from her face, rain and tears indistinguishable now. "Stay with me," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't. Her lips trembled, trying to form words. He leaned closer, desperate to catch them. "You finish it," she murmured, her voice barely there. "For me," and then the stillness hit harder than the gunfire. For a second, the rain itself seemed to stop, suspended in the air around them. Ethan's body went numb, as if grief had hollowed him out in one violent breath. Cole grabbed his shoulder, shouting over the wind, "We can't stay, they're coming." Ethan looked up, his eyes burning with something between fury and despair. Slowly, he laid Leela down, his fingers lingering on her face one last time before he forced himself to move. He slipped the flash drive into his jacket pocket, the final piece of her. When he rose, something in him had changed. The hesitation that once tethered him was gone, replaced by a quiet, lethal clarity. They ran through the darkness, gunfire echoing behind them, the storm masking their escape. The car was half sunk in mud, headlights flickering weakly. Cole slid into the driver's seat, shouting for Ethan to get in. As they tore down the road, the compound behind them lit up like a wound in the landscape, alarms wailing into the night. Neither man spoke. For miles, only the sound of rain and the engine filled the void between them. Ethan stared out the window, his reflection fractured by the glass. Somewhere in the distance, the horizon began to pale, the first hint of dawn breaking through the storm. Finally, Cole spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "She knew the risk. We all did." Ethan turned to him, voice cold. "You could have stopped it." Cole gripped the wheel tighter. "You think I didn't try? You think she didn't make me promise not to tell you?" Ethan looked away, jaw tightening. The road twisted through the forest like a scar, branches clawing at the windshield. After a while, he said softly, "She wasn't supposed to die like that." Cole's answer was a whisper. None of them were. They drove until the sun began to bleed through the clouds, pale gold spreading across the wet earth. Cole pulled the car over by an old bridge that overlooked the sea. "This is as far as I go," he said. "They'll be tracking us. You can still disappear. Pretend this never happened." Ethan got out, the wind tearing at his coat. He looked toward the horizon where the sea met the light, vast, endless, indifferent. "Pretend," he said. "You still don't get it. This isn't about pretending anymore." He took the flash drive from his pocket, staring at it like it might burn through his hand. "This is all that's left of her." Cole stepped out, his tone sharper now. "Then make it count. You release that data, it won't just take them down, it'll take you with it. Your name, your face, everything tied to her. They'll bury you the same way they buried her." Ethan turned to him. "Then let them try." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Cole reached into his coat and handed Ethan a small card. "An address. There's someone in the city. A journalist. She's been waiting for proof like this for years. If you want the truth out, she's your way in. But once it's out, there's no going back." Ethan took the card. Was this her plan all along? Cole nodded faintly. "She wanted the world to know what they did, but she also wanted you to live. You have to decide which promise you'll keep." Ethan looked down at the flash drive again. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt heavy, as though the storm had moved inside him. When he looked up, Cole was already walking away, his figure fading into the mist. Ethan stayed there for a long time, the sea roaring below, gulls circling like ghosts in the pale morning light. Then, slowly, he turned and began walking toward the city. The skyline emerged hours later, steel and glass rising from the haze. The streets were waking up, people moving like currents through the noise of a world unaware that a secret was about to break beneath its feet. He found the address, a narrow building tucked between cafes and old bookshops. The door buzzed open, and he climbed the stairs to a cluttered office. A woman sat at a desk, her eyes sharp behind round glasses. She looked up as he entered. "You're late," she said. Ethan froze. "You were expecting me." She smiled faintly. "Lila told me you'd come." The air seemed to thin. She told you. "She reached out months ago," the woman said. "Said she was working on something that could change everything, but she needed someone she could trust if she didn't make it." Ethan placed the flash drive on her desk. "This is it." The woman hesitated, her gaze flicking between him and the drive. "Do you know what's on it?" He nodded. "Enough to destroy them." She plugged it in. The screen came to life, rows of files, documents, photos, timestamps. Each line was a piece of the story Lila had died for. As she began scrolling, the silence in the room deepened. There were patient logs, falsified data, hidden deaths all buried under layers of deception. And at the heart of it, her name, Lila Grant. The journalist looked up, eyes wide. This could expose half the board of directors, government officials, investors. "You realize what you're holding." Ethan's voice was steady. "The truth." She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "If we publish this, people will come after us after you. You ready for that?" Ethan's gaze drifted toward the window. Outside, the morning light was breaking fully now, pouring through the rain-streaked glass like a promise. "I'm ready," he said. "I've already lost everything else." The woman nodded, her expression softening. "Then let's make sure she didn't die for nothing." Hours passed. They worked in silence, decrypting, cross-referencing, building the story piece by piece. With each document that opened, Ethan felt Lila's presence, her handwriting in the margins, her annotations, her small, precise notes. It was as though she was guiding them still, whispering through the data. By nightfall, the article was ready. The journalist turned to him one last time. "Once I hit publish, there's no undoing it." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. "Do it." Her finger hovered for a heartbeat, then pressed the key. A single click, quiet and final. Across the world, screens lit up. News outlets, feeds, forums, Lila's truth unleashed. Ethan watched the first headline appear. "Whistleblower exposes human trials cover-up." Her photo accompanied it. That same soft smile he remembered from the wedding night, the one that had started everything. For a moment, the noise of the city faded, replaced by the faint hum of something larger: vindication, grief, release. Then came the chaos. Phones rang. Alerts pinged. Voices outside rose in confusion and disbelief. But Ethan didn't hear them. He stood by the window, watching the rain begin again, soft this time, like the sky was finally grieving too. He pulled out the photograph from the facility, the one of her walking down that cold hallway. He stared at it for a long while, then folded it carefully, tucking it inside his coat. The journalist's voice broke through the quiet. "What will you do now?" He turned to her, a faint, tired smile on his lips. "Finish what she started." Meaning, he said. "There's more than one truth to tell." He walked out into the night. The city lights reflecting in puddles, each step heavy yet certain. The world was changing behind him, stories spreading, names unraveling, systems cracking open. But for Ethan, it was quieter than that. He thought of Lila not as she'd died, but as she'd lived, laughing under string lights, dancing barefoot in the rain, asking him to be her plus one because she didn't want to face the world alone. And now she wasn't alone. He crossed the bridge as dawn began again. The sky opening to a bruised gold, the wind carried the faint sound of the sea, the same endless rhythm that had followed them from the start. For a moment, he stopped and looked out over the water. The city's reflections shimmered below, fractured and beautiful. He reached into his pocket, took out the flash drive's empty casing, and let it fall. It hit the surface soundlessly, disappearing beneath the waves. The storm was over. But somewhere in that quiet, in the vastness between the living and the lost, he could almost hear her voice again, soft, certain, eternal. "You found me." And for the first time in a long while, Ethan let himself breathe. The days that followed were not loud. They unfolded quietly, like the ocean after a storm, still moving, still infinite, but slower now. The chaos that had erupted after the story broke began to scatter into fragments of headlines, protests, interviews, and investigations. The world took what it wanted from Lila's truth, twisted it into news cycles and political speeches. But for Ethan, it was never about the noise. It was about silence, about the spaces she'd left behind and the echoes that filled them. He stayed in the city, though part of him wanted to disappear entirely. The journalist Mara had offered him a place to lay low, but he spent most of his time by the waterfront instead, watching the fog roll in from the sea. The same sea that had once mirrored their laughter, their arguments, their promises. It looked unchanged, yet he felt it differently now. It no longer spoke of endings or beginnings. It simply existed like memory itself. One morning, weeks after the truth had gone public, he found himself walking the pier before dawn. The air was cold and thin, the kind that carried sound easily. Somewhere in the distance a ship's horn echoed, low and mournful. He slipped his hands into his pockets and felt the folded photograph, Lila walking down that sterile hallway. He hadn't been able to let it go, not yet. The city behind him was slowly waking. Lights flickered in the windows, and the world began its daily motion. Ethan stood at the edge of the pier, the wood damped beneath his shoes, and tried to remember the exact sound of her laugh. He could recall her voice, her eyes, her words, but her laughter was slipping away, fading into the static of time. A gull landed near him, tilting its head curiously before taking off again. It left a single feather drifting in the air, twisting and catching the first pale light of morning. He watched it fall until it disappeared into the water. He thought of what Cole had said, that she wanted him to live. It had felt impossible then. How do you keep living when the person who gave your life meaning is gone? But standing there now, surrounded by the quiet, he began to understand. Living wasn't about pretending nothing had happened. It was about carrying it forward, about letting what mattered shape you, not shatter you. He turned as footsteps approached behind him. Mara appeared, wrapped in a long coat, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him. "You're up early again," she said softly. He managed a small smile. "Couldn't sleep, me neither. Every network's still calling. They want follow-ups, statements, a face for the story. I'm not giving them one," he said. She nodded, not pressing further. "You don't have to. The work's done." He looked at her, the steam from the coffee curling between them. "It'll never really be done. Not for me." Mara glanced out at the horizon. "You know," she said, "I've read hundreds of whistleblower stories. They all start the same way, with one person who decides the truth is worth more than their safety. But this one feels different." Ethan tilted his head. "How so?" "She didn't do it just to expose them," Mara said. "She did it to save something. Maybe not herself, but maybe someone she loved." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "She did save me," he said. Then, quieter, even if it meant losing herself. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of church bells from the old district. Mara set her cup down on the railing. "You know, you could tell her story yourself. A book, a documentary, whatever you want. You were part of it. People need to hear it from the one person who knew her best." Ethan shook his head slowly. "She never wanted to be remembered for what she exposed. She wanted to be remembered for who she was before all of it." "Who was she?" Mara asked gently. He took a long breath, eyes still on the sea. "She was light in places that didn't deserve it. She asked questions no one else did. She cared, even when it hurt. She believed that love was proof we were still human." Mara smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's the story you tell." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket, unfolded the photograph one last time, and studied it. She looked almost like she was walking into another world. Maybe, in some way, she had. He turned it over. For the first time, he noticed faint writing on the back, smudged and nearly washed away by time and water. "For words, you'll know when to." He stared at them, heart slowing, the meaning sinking in like a tide returning to shore. Later that afternoon, he walked into the city, through streets humming with life and movement. Billboards flickered. Vendors shouted. The world, in all its indifference, continued spinning. He stopped by a small park near the river where cherry trees were shedding their last blossoms. The air was filled with drifting petals, pink against the gray sky. He sat on a bench and opened his phone. For weeks, he'd ignored every call, every message. But now he opened the file directory and scrolled to a hidden folder, the backup of Lila's notes, her recorded memos, her unfinished thoughts. He tapped one. Her voice filled the air, soft and steady. "If you're hearing this, it means I ran out of time. But maybe that's okay. Maybe time was never the point. Maybe it was about what we do inside it." He closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. She continued, "I used to think love was about keeping people safe, but I was wrong. Love isn't safety, it's risk. It's the willingness to lose everything just to know that for a while you were real to someone. If I could tell you one thing, Ethan, it's that we never really vanish. We just change form, find new ways to be remembered." He didn't realize he was crying until the screen blurred. He listened until her voice faded, the recording ending in static, and in that moment, something inside him settled. Not healed, not entirely, but softened, like a wound, learning to close. He took out the photograph again, now creased and worn. Then, with a steady hand, he tore it in half, one piece for her, one for him. He stood, crossed to the riverbank, and let her half drift away with petals. The wind picked up, carrying whispers of spring through the air. That night, he returned to his small apartment overlooking the water. He sat by the window with the lights off, city reflections rippling across his face. He thought about all that had been lost and all that had been found, the truth, the cost, the fragile beauty of both. On the table beside him lay her ring, the one she'd worn to the wedding where everything began. He turned it between his fingers, the metal catching the faint light. It was simple, elegant, unbroken. He placed it in a small box and wrote a single note for Lila. "You finished it." He sealed it, not to send, but to keep a quiet reminder that love, like truth, never really dies. It just changes where it lives. Outside, the city lights flickered across the river, scattering in every direction like constellations. He found himself thinking about something Lila once said during a night much like this one. "We spend so much time looking for meaning when maybe the meaning was just in being there for each other." And for the first time since that night by the cliffs, Ethan smiled. Not the kind born of happiness, but of understanding. He knew now that stories didn't end with loss. They ended with what we choose to do with it, with how we carry it forward. The world would move on, the story would fade into archives, documentaries, citations. But somewhere, quietly, two lives would remain connected, one in memory, one in motion. He rose from his chair, opened the window, and let the night air in. The city's pulse hummed below, steady, alive. As he looked out over the dark water, he whispered into the wind, "You're not gone, Leela. You're just everywhere now." For a moment, the breeze shifted, soft and warm against his face, almost like an answer. He stood there until dawn, the horizon slowly blushing with light, the storm long gone but its memory etched in everything it touched. And when the first rays broke across the water, Ethan finally turned away, his footsteps echoing softly in the quiet room, one lighter than the last, because sometimes, love isn't about holding on, it's about learning how to let go, and still keep something beautiful alive within you. And somewhere, perhaps beyond the reach of time, the woman who had once asked him to be her +1 was still walking beside him. Only now, she wasn't the only one he wanted. She was the one he carried, quietly, endlessly, within him. The sea, the city, and the wind bore witness to it, all the proof that even after the storm, even after the breaking, something still remains. A pulse, a memory, a choice. And maybe that was always the question behind their story. When everything you love becomes a memory, will you choose to grieve it, or to live it? Ethan exhaled, slow and sure. And the answer, whispered softly into the rising light, was simple. He chose to live it.